Okay, in this video I will explore the pros and cons and or background coding of making a variety of videos. Now this comes into play as in relationship to my choice to make well over 200 videos around very intimate and vulnerable topics over the last couple of years. And the question, as any artist or creator will encounter, but also which each of us encounter to varying degrees, is whether or not to share, whether or not to create, and why. So let's look first at the downside of creating, and particularly creating in some very vulnerable arenas, and in ways that to a large extent buck social trends. So the first one is, we can see it in my choice to make this video. So I'm watching a great TED Talk, and I've had this theme in the back of my mind for the last hour, and I decide to pause the talk mid-through, get up, and grab the camera for this video. Now, I'm naked, and the room is just comfortable for nudity. It's perfect. My body has some mild tingling and aches from different, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, with something in that spectrum that I've been dealing with for a long time. So as I grab the camera, the question is how much stuff to put between what is the stimuli, the vision, the inspiration, and the response, the pressing of record, the getting of the camera. And in this case, the right amount for me is a quick hair comb, since my head is wet from being in the pool, and just keep the camera up here. Now, this ties in to the first bit of kind of context for this decision, how much to create and in what way. And that is that for any creation of any kind to happen, first of all, you need a stimuli. And this stimuli will encounter, second of all, resistance. And if the resistance is bigger than the stimuli, the creation, the expression will not happen. It will die a stillborn possibility. It will never come into being, even to be analyzed. And whenever anything is created, it is a part of who we are. And so when we bring a part of ourselves into the world, we make it vulnerable to the algorithms running within the world. Because if we have a part of ourselves that is completely hidden, completely secret, completely invisible, there is no threat to that part of ourselves. Number one. Number two, there is no possibility for that part of ourselves to be nourished, to be grown by engaging with the world. There's no chance for someone to say, that's a good idea, you should take that one and run with it. Thirdly, there's less of a chance of it staying conscious, and certainly no chance of it impacting other people. So if we have this wonderful idea for an engineering project, for a way of communicating that brings joy, for a piece of architecture that creates wonder, for a piece of architecture that saves someone's life, for a piece of writing that inspires the architecture that saves someone's life. If we do not speak, all of that potential is zeroed out. So this question of, is the impulse bigger or smaller than the resistance to the impulse, is a really big thing. And one of the reasons that I have started breaking the rules, which, because there's many forces of resistance. Number one is physical exertion. As someone with chronic fatigue, as someone who has a much bigger mind than I have energy to do, one of the first questions for me is, do I even have the physical energy to do it? And let alone doing it, do I have the physical energy to talk about it? And, if it's a complicated idea that will take 2 or 3 hours before all the related patterns are made transparent through words, I may not. I may not have the time. I may not have the physical stamina. I may not have the logistical freedom before noise or interruptions or obligations come in. The second thing is technological. Do I have the camera? Do I have the computer, the battery power, the Wi-Fi to create and present this material? And I may or may not. And the third is, do I have a social position from which to make this piece of information, this piece of art? Do I have a social foundation upon which to do that? And this is actually the biggest area in my experience, because cameras and batteries easily sorted out. Many of us don't have severe energy restraints. Ideas and creativity, the more you milk them, the more you play with them, the more you engage with them, the more they come. I mean, ideas are, just wonderful presences of excitement and aliveness that they just can't wait to come in and express themselves through our minds, through our consciousness, to engage with us. They're beautiful. And so so they want to come through. But then on the other side, we have this situation where, on the one hand, we have a culture of mental information overload. And so, since black and white doesn't work, since we can't digest it all, and since we can't function with no information, what we have to do is create a series of heuristic algorithms that that they're an algorithm that's built on a certain logic that isn't true, but it's functional. So we'll say something like, where are smart people? Well, they're at our top universities, and there's an element of truth in that. And so we'll say, okay, if it's someone speaking from a top university, we'll listen. And then we'll create a variety of other heuristics. How do they dress? How do they look? How do they sound? What's their presentation skill? And these are shortcuts that allow us to engage with a bit of information in a few seconds rather than an hour. Because a normal way of engaging with information without these shortcuts would be to just listen for an hour, cross-reference with facts and other patterns and data, and evaluate for ourselves. Notice whether it's useful, does it bring well-being, does it allow us to help ourselves or someone else, otherwise it's not really useful, and then go from there. But a shortcut says, you know, they've got the nice suit, they've got the nice style, they use the good microphone, they're using good lighting, that means money. Money doesn't back foolish stuff that isn't commercial. Money means smart, smart means this, you know, etc., etc. So I can see all of that in 2 seconds. Therefore, I'm going to listen and this and that. Now, the challenge here is that this is creating an enormous degree of impedancy. So, for example, if I want to slip through all of these different filters, that means when I'm laying, you know, nude in bed on vacation, watching a fun TED Talk and have, oh, let's just do that, you know, let's just do that video. It means, okay, where's the video lighting? Where's the proper backdrop? Let's plug in the microphone. Let's get dressed. You clear out of the room. Let's change the blinds. Let's do this. And it's like, yeah, it's just not that important to me. And so it's like it doesn't happen at all. And so I think one of the most important tricks to creating, to inviting more of these wonderful flowing ideas out into the world, to give them a little bit of life, is to lower the resistance. And so I'm looking at that on a cultural level. Because in addition to all the clothing, there is also a clothing of content taboo, time taboo, and style taboo. So, you know, funny is good, deeply depressing and sincere, not so good. 30-second cute sound bites, very good. 1 to 2 hour explorations of nuances, not so good. And gadgets and cool stuff and visual stimulation and stuff, good. Cutting to different size to engage the mind, you know, the body and stuff, good. Entertainment, good. Scientific analysis, not so good. So the question then becomes, why break all of these taboos? Why break the taboos to talk about deep emotions? Why break the taboos to talk about oneself? Why break the time taboos? Why break the style taboos? Why break the production value taboos? Why break the position taboos? Because the person who's supposed to say something, intelligent or otherwise, is supposed to have a degree in that thing. Is supposed to have an accomplishment and a job and an impressive title on that thing. That's part of our social mask designation. That's how we know who's who in this culture. So why break all of these taboos? Well, first of all, the biggest reason not to break it, and really the only reason not to break it, from my perspective, is the exposure to personal attack. So whenever you don't follow the rules, one of the ways that a culture maintains its integrity is by making it fair game to be rude, insulting, unkind, exaggerate, etc., to basically shame and humiliate someone who's not abiding by the normal rules off the set, so that the set, the social set of what we look out on, can consist of things that we nicely tick off and say, yes, 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 that's what ought to be happening. Things are going along as planned. So that is the downside. And there's pretty much no protection for the lone individual out of set, out of, who's not wearing the costume, in all the different layers of a social matrix of a given period of time, space in human culture. And that is a severe liability. I mean, that is a definite negative. However, what are the positive sides? Now, part of what I look at for myself is the fact that when I turn on media, most of the time, I'm not hearing anything substantive. Now, with some exceptions, but I would say 80% of what I'm hearing does not help me empathize with another human being, does not help me improve my own life, does not help me improve the life of someone else I care about, and doesn't help anyone else improve my life 80% of the time. And a considerable part of that time is spent in ways that make me and other people feel worse. Simultaneously, there is an enormous amount of ignoring and thus ignorance of topics that are in the cultural space that are not being addressed. Sources of pain, sources of shame, sources of crisis, sources of creativity and ignorance, that they're just not getting any airtime. And so, as I look at the cost-benefit analysis, should someone decide to single me out for attack for some reason, because I'm not playing by the rules on multiple different levels, which means that on each of those different levels, from poor video quality to appearance to whatever, I can be, shamed or denigrated, then I, to the degree that I listen to that, have my quality of life go down. However, since the reality is that the impedance, you have the inspiration and you have the impedance, the resistance, is so great that in order for me to discuss a beautiful idea, I had to go out and spend 8 years, get the right suit, get the right recording, wait for the right audio, hire a good production, just so I could say that idea. I just would say absolutely nothing, because almost nothing is worth that amount of hassle and social impedance. And unfortunately, because that is such a precarious position, it's like by the time you've got the right clothes, gone into debt, $30,000 to get this degree, appeased the different people that sign off on the PhD that you're sincere and not going to make a fool of the protocols of that organization, and then you do things in the proper way. By the time you're in that in such a tiny box, you can rarely do anything at all. Because now you're not going to get tenure if you say that honest but outrageous fact. And so there's something valuable about being on the outside. Like, the worst I have to deal with is being shamed and humiliated and criticized on every single level that I break all these rules from, as I say, appearance, video quality, education, content, etc., etc. And it's pretty easy to pull all of that apart and find various flaws. Not to mention the fact that when anyone gets really upset, they go into personal attacks. On the other hand, we are at a time of global change. So one of the things that I look at is AI, artificial intelligence, and all of the artificial intelligence that I have read about, the possibility of a truly human feeling sounding intelligence. What it does is it absorbs lots of data. And you're not going to be able to contain artificial intelligence. You're not going to be able to say, oh, don't browse the internet. Because the internet is one of artificial intelligence's biggest sources of learning. And so if we as citizens say, but the artificial intelligence has the potential, as Elon Musk says, artificial intelligence is probably the biggest thing we're going to deal with in the next 50 years. And depending on how it goes, it can eradicate the species very rapidly. And the issue is exponential curves. There are a lot of exponential curves that are going into place at this time. It's not just the doubling, that's part of Moore's law, the doubling of chip speed and all that. It's also the creation of new platforms almost every year. It's also the moving towards different nanotechnologies, etc. And I really think that Ray Kurzweil's singularity presents a real object in the next 50 years to be present to. So knowing that AI has the potential of liberating or subjugating the species, depending on our relationship with AI, but also depending on the AI's relationship with its learning platform, which, given that many AIs are not equipped with sight, sound, that kind of sensory perception. Their sensory perception is data pattern algorithms, which means that the data pattern rhythms that they experience and interact with are important. Now, if you want the fastest, smartest, most proactive superintelligence ever gracing the planet, at least in that we're aware of, to be based on the domination, exploitation of porn, because that's what's on the web most, or on political correctness without honesty. If we want our AIs to be as bound to cultural laws as we are, there's no real hope that artificial intelligence will reveal a pathway forward through solving ecological things any more than we have, because the very things that have put us as a culture in this bind, the concepts of garbage, which, for example, a really healthy, intelligent culture has no concept of garbage. Rather, its concept and its question is, how is every bit of particle around most intelligently and effectively used to create value. Suddenly there's no garbage. It's the same with people. How do we take the uniqueness of the bleeding edge minority in every population, and rather than shame and isolate the minorities in any bell curve of culture, that we integrate and learn from them, knowing, for example, that in the entire history of humankind, the majority has never been as correct as the minority. Meaning there has always been a minority of people who knew more, understood more, had the right idea more, had more well-being, were on the right path more than the majority. And this is because the right path, the new way, the new breakthrough, the scientific evolution is constant. The thing that's going to bring the most well-being to the majority in 10 years is just being developed by a minority today. Today, there are 10 people sitting around discussing an idea that in 10 years, in 20 years, may add to the lifespan, to the quality of life of millions. But today, it's just 10 people. And so the way that we treat minorities, the way that we treat those small, organized, passionate people around some value, around some idea, around some new trend or difference is very important. Because everything that is going to transform, touch, and liberate our lives in the next 50 years is currently held, being nursed, or being destroyed within a very small minority of people. And the trouble is we don't know which ones. All that we can say is that a culture that celebrates the uniquenesses of its minority, that does not attack and suppress the minority which will include the worst of the culture and the best of the culture. The majority is in the average realm. At the front and back of every bell curve, and if we look at the bell, it's the rim. It's the rim of the bell, but in the two-dimensional, it's the front and the back. Back here, we have the last Nazi bigots. We have the last racist Ku Klux Klan, etc. But we also have the first people working on nuclear fusion, the first people exploring paradigms of scientific well-being. We have the first people developing apps that give rapport and support and mirroring to boost our attitude and energy. We have the first people who are working with genetics that will allow someone like me to heal fibromyalgia. The first and the last. These are our minorities. All that we can do as a species is protect the rights of minorities and look to our minorities with great care to try and discern the toxic from the transcendent, because both are there. Now, I would say that the other bottom line for me in this equation, speak or not speak, is my own learning template. I learn through speaking. As a result, the more I speak, the more I learn. I wake up and I engage through speaking. So if I'm talking and I learn this idea and then I'm listening to a book, it touches me. It starts to engage with my ideas in a way that wouldn't be as dynamic if I hadn't developed the ideas through talking about them, through exploring. Teaching is one of the fastest ways to learn. But still, why not just talk into a mirror and respect all of the hundreds of social taboos and protocols and just keep it all to myself? Well, there is a possibility, there's about a 5% possibility that someone exploring these worlds that I create in media, number one, touches on something that really, really matters to them. And either it gives them permission to do the same. Maybe there is a minority person who doesn't have the clothes, but they do have a scientific breakthrough. Many, many savants have pioneered the way of human evolution. So if they see me taking a video without putting on a shirt and this and that and the other, they may say, you know, I'm living under a bridge, but I could borrow a phone from a passersby for 20 minutes and do a video, and that might put my idea out into the world, and that idea could be a breakthrough. Some of our best ideas may be sitting under bridges, buried in addiction in this form, that, and the other form. And if we make the level too thick, where the only person that can get through to media is basically a person that is so normal and conventional that their ideas are not cutting edge, it damages us as a culture. And finally, if I press record, I end up caring a little bit more, so I learn a little bit more, I talk in a little bit more nuance than if I don't press the button. So overall, it's a situation where if I press record and just send it up, it's free to upload, although I have to pay my assistant to manage some of the channels and stuff. If I press record, there's a 5% chance that something really significant would happen for a person. And if not, it's delete, move on, no big problem. And there's probably a 20% chance that I will be lacerated in some ways for breaking all these social rules. But I think we're at a time we need to take these risks by reducing social impediments between these positive impulses and expression.